some days when training is going well, like it's super quiet in the mind and almost meditative, kind of like the ideal of what you might think if you watch someone doing handstands and they're moving really smoothly. You just must like think that, oh, they're so calm. But then other days, because I'm always trying to push my limits, um, I'm like throwing my handstand blocks across the gym, across the parking lot outside of the gym, and like throwing a temper tantrum. And you don't get to see that because that's not the type of stuff we post on the internet for
Uh,
people to see as we encourage them to train with us.
Today, Zack Height joins me. He is a master coach, I would call him that, in calisthenics, gymnastics, body weight movement, stretching. He sometimes is refers to as the guy that does handstands, the handstand man. What he only does for training is handstands, which is darn fascinating. Talk about simplicity. Talk about focusing on the one thing. We get into his fit training philosophy, why he does what he does. Him and I have crossed paths quite a few times before. We've collaborated. He's probably one of the, if not the most knowledgeable person within training that I know. I take a lot of knowledge and inspiration from him. He got me challenged during the podcast, and that takes quite a bit to do training wise. And I think you will love this if you're into training, if you're into calisthenics, especially body weight, gymnastics. We go deep, and Zack is phenomenal at it. Even CrossFit. I mean, that's both of our foundation to some degree. So enjoy this podcast with Zack Height, number 37. Zack, amazing to have you on. It's been a long time coming. Finally, what should I say? The gift is out to be revealed to the world, in my opinion, in my eyes. I call you a master trainer. You're more humble yourself. Zack, who are you and what do you do? Like, what change are you making in this world in a short summary? We'll kick it off from there.
Oh, Sebastian, it's good to be here. First, let me say that I know you've been trying to get me on here forever, so excited to be here and excited to do this podcast with you. Who I am, gosh, I'm just like a regular guy who really likes training and exercise and just like physical movement. Um, right now, what I do is I coach online, so I help people kind of build their bodies up or build their bodies back, build mobility, learn handstands, learn coordinated type movements, whether that be like juggling or spine waves or more traditional types of exercise like squats, lunges, deadlifts, and like handstands, like I mentioned. So that's kind of the short version of what I do.
So the way we got connected was, I don't know how many years ago now, but this is back in Palo Alto, CrossFit Amity. And the amount of care and lack, I should say, the detail, the attention to detail you had is something that I haven't witnessed before. And I'm pretty hard-headed, but you pointed things out, and that humbled me pretty greatly. And in my opinion, that takes a great coach. And you've evolved since then quite a bit. It's been an interesting journey. But still to this day, it's fascinating to see in your profession for you to change and shift and grow the way you have, because it's easy to claim that, all right, I've made it fairly high in the CrossFit community, I'm good at what I do, and let's continue. There's way more to you, and what I'm fascinated about is that to a regular person, I don't like, you don't strike me, or maybe not someone else, as a spiritual person, but to me, as I'm observing you more and your movements, like there's great just presence. And presence is one of the things that why I started calisthenics and body movement myself, is that the extreme presence of the moment, the extreme connection to the body, to the now. And you go into any type of, you could say, especially like Buddhism, like being right here, right now is essential into that. I might be taking it in a different direction. I'm curious, just as a lead question into that, like how, when you are doing what you're doing, what does that feel like?
Man, that's an interesting question because it changes so much day to day. Um, I guess from a similar side, how you got into calisthenics for kind of like a deeper meaning. Um, I always liked like the technical aspects of movement. I grew up playing baseball, and I would love to just sit in the batting cages after practice. The coach would leave us a key for the people who wanted to work extra, and just literally hit till the sun went down, whether it was
Mm.
off a tee or if I could talk someone into staying with me. And I was never like the best baseball player, but I think that I was probably, with the knowledge that I had, probably the best baseball player I was going to become,
Mm.
even though there's plenty of people way more talented and way smarter about how they were able to train than me. So it was a natural evolution, like going through CrossFit, and CrossFit having the technical elements of Olympic weightlifting combined with semi-gymnastic stuff like muscle ups, where if you were a skilled athlete who was maybe a little skinnier like myself, you could compete well against some of the bigger, stronger guys. And of course, they would have the advantage on some things. And in the middle, right, there'd be more cardiovascular stuff that was, unless there was a big size difference, you were pretty even on. And so with that kind of perspective, I was naturally drawn to some of the more technical elements of gymnastics, and handstands in particular really became something that I just wanted to get quite good at. And as I got more into handstands, I realized like my flexibility was poor. I had a lot of imbalances from left to right, most likely from playing baseball because I batted and threw right-handed. So I was really good at turning left,
Mm.
but turning right and bending right just doesn't really happen at all for me. So by getting into this more technical style of training where it's more about how you do it than what you do, really gave me something to just dive deep into and completely occupy my mind. And so kind of like getting to your question of what it's like to train, how I said it's different depending on the day. Some days when training is going well, like it's super quiet in the mind and almost meditative, kind of like the ideal of what you might think if you watch someone doing handstands and they're moving really smoothly.
Mm.
You just must like think that, oh, they're so calm. But then other days, because I'm always trying to push my limits, um, I'm like throwing my handstand blocks across the gym, across the parking lot outside of the gym, and like throwing a temper tantrum. And you don't get to see that because that's not the type of stuff we post on the internet for people to see as we encourage them to train with us. But it can be incredibly frustrating, and that's also a big element of what I wanted to do with my gymnastics training, is because I was coaching so many people for so many years in movements that I was so familiar with, that conceptually I knew that it's frustrating to learn, but I'd forgotten the feeling of what it's like to actually struggle and fight and like not be able to physically do something that the coach is telling you to do.
Yeah.
So by embracing the one-arm handstand journey, I have found plenty of frustration and remembered very clearly what it's like to be a beginner again.
Where are you currently at in that journey with the one hand on handstand?
I've been working on it for about 2.5 years. I got started seriously on the one-arm handstand journey in June of 2020. When the gyms kind of closed for COVID, I was like, all right, now it's time to get serious. I had some weights at home, but it just wasn't as fun lifting without my buddies. I got like a weight training partner, my buddy Ken, who's super strong. We normally would train together, but with the COVID stuff, I'm working out in the park alone, and started to take on the one-arm handstands. So it's been 2.5 years. My best on the left side is 10 seconds. My best on the right is 13 seconds.
Ooh.
To some, that might sound pretty good, but for like the level that I'd like to get at, I would still say that I'm very much on like the front end of the journey. I'd love to, if I can stay healthy and, everything stays smooth and according to plan, train handstands for the next 20 years and just keep gradual improvement along the way. It's pretty low impact. You have to train frequently, so there's good opportunities to hurt yourself. But in general, like the training of the handstands itself, and then the preparation for mobility and moving well and being very efficient, is very conducive to just a long-term training plan.
Yeah, that's been one of the greatest challenges that I've started realizing is I started when I was younger. It was all, for so many people, it's all about lifting the most weight and getting the biggest muscles. And then I realized there are certain movements I'm able to lift a weight exactly how I lift the weight. But if I need to balance something slightly off, like let's say in real world, I am almost fairly weak, like not that much stronger than other people. I'm like, shit, this is embarrassing. Like, I have all these muscles, I can lift whatever, how many pounds in a deadlift or a squat or a bench, but when it comes to ordinary
with the
day,
perfect barbell shape and everything.
yeah, exactly, yeah, but then when you doing the regular type of day stuff, or like, I remember being wrestled down by one of my best friends because he sized me up when I came back from the US one year. He's like, "Oh, you think you're so big?" And he just took me down. And I'm like, "Fuck, man!" Like, I think that's one of the greatest things that, or I think the path that I'm on right now. How do you make your strength functional in ordinary life? Like, you can, if anything were to happen, like, I would take such great pride in, like, let's say if we're hiking, my wife and I, on a trail, and there's a tree that's fallen down. I'm like, "Oh yeah, time to get to action and moving that tree," and no one else is able to move that tree, and I'm like, "Okay, thank you, deadlifts." But then when it comes to moving a person or moving my own body weight, I couldn't do it, and that's how I started more on the calisthenics route, based in combination with the meditative presence approach, because I realized if I'm able to just bang out the reps and get the adrenaline rushing, all right, I'm in the zone. But then it's not so applicable to anything else in my life. I'm like, okay, this is becoming a crutch that I'm using, but it's I'm not a holistic person. So I feel like there's so much of the mind in the same time that you train when you're doing calisthenics, and it's also, I mean, there's been several studies. I remember especially one talk that his name is Ben Greenfield. He's considering himself fairly fit, and he was at this expo, and there was this fitness competition, and he thought, okay, I'll beat this guy, like any guy who shows up. And the guy who won the competition ahead of Ben Greenfield only did a very, you could say, advanced version of yoga with a lot of long static holds. And this is what I'm realizing now, having done this for, I don't know, over 2 years, is what I needed to do with barbells and heavy weights, I'm able to accomplish, at least for the upper body. The lower body, that there's no getting away from, in my opinion. Sometimes heavy weights, but the upper body static holds is freaking king. So I'm going off a bit of a tangent here, but it's to highlight I think what I used to see, and what a lot of people might see as that calisthenics is, oh, it's only for people who have done things for a long time. Oh, I will get skinny and weak if I do it. Maybe you can share your journey, what it's been like for you, because you can still put up some pretty heavy weights, even though you only do handstands, as you call yourself, the handstand guy.
Yeah, semi-respected hand balancer on Instagram. Maybe I'm semi-respected now. I don't know yet. I'm working towards semi-respected. Hopefully one day. You brought up some really good points just about like variety of training. And so, like, kind of going back to what you were talking about, lifting with the bar, I felt very similar through my journey with Olympic weightlifting, right? If I nailed a snatch or a clean perfectly, it's like my body didn't even feel it, right? Like stretch reflex, everything is lined up, bones are stacked, stand up, no problem. But just like a little bit off, and it's like ice picks in the knees, back is tweaked for 3 weeks, can't tie my shoes. And like a lift where if you watched in the video, like you wouldn't even say that I did anything wrong. So like that kind of feeling of like, this can't be good for me, right? Like I'm not even 30 years old, I'm already feeling like this can't be good. And so that really led me to wanting to kind of make that change into something different. Can you kind of refresh me on the end part of the question? I was kind of latched onto that part and just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, when you're in your training, I guess that it's okay to jump off a different tangent. I guess my question is, actually, let's bring it back to your post of that I referred to on Instagram, when you said in 2019 you went into you started realizing what you were saying right now with weightlifting, like you were not healthy anymore, like or you realize you're not healthy. To any regular person, they're like, you're freaking insane, like look at you, Zack, like you look like a beast, you lift a bunch of weights, how are you not healthy? Like, can you tell us about why you consider yourself not being healthy and the realizations that you made back then?
Yeah. So, how do you define health, right? Like our health is health, the markers on a test that the doctor gives you, um, or is health your ability to move in the environment? Is health how you feel, right? Is it a combination of all of these things? And I think it's a combination of many factors. Um, and so for me, when I was saying that I wasn't healthy, is basically like I could do these very specific tasks, but like, it took me an hour to get warmed up. And then afterwards, when I cooled back down, I felt terrible.
Mm.
And like, I'm not a scientist or a biologist or anything like that, but I know enough about the human body to understand like how the wear and tear builds up, and how over long periods of time, if you just keep hammering something and keeping joints inflamed, they're going to become arthritic, they're going to become stiff and tight, and as you get older, you're going to be hobbling around,
Mm.
like someone who's been in a ton of motorcycle crashes. But all I would have done was just like lift weights like a bonehead. And so, like, I guess just like a part of getting older, right? You start thinking about time in a different way, and what's important to you today changes very much compared to like what's important to you today when you're, 22 years old, right? What's important to you today when you're 22 is probably like something that's going to happen 15 minutes from now.
Mm.
Whereas like now I'm 38 years old. So what's important to me today is like I'm plotting out like 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the future and even further. What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? How do I want to feel when I do it? And so thinking about being unhealthy was just that concept of being in constant pain, and understanding that I knew what I was doing and still just like banging my head against the wall anyway, just because I had these arbitrary goals of wanting to squat 400 pounds. And my best back squat ever was 180 kilos, which is 396 pounds, back around 2014 or 15. And, like 4 years later, I'm still like struggling to like try to make this happen. And it's just
Mm.
like, what's the point, right? Like no
Mm.
one cares. No, like if I tell someone I squatted 396 versus 400, like, are they not going to be my friend anymore? Like
Right.
it was completely irrational.
Mm.
And I don't know if you've trained a lot before, like this, what I'm saying might make sense. And if not, you may be like, what's this guy even talking about? Why would you ever care what your numbers are, right? Like, wouldn't you just want to feel good?
They
So
probably wouldn't be listening too long into this podcast regardless. So geek out.
yeah, that's true. So if you're still here, you kind of get what I'm talking about. Um, but yeah, it just came down to like the reason I got into CrossFit in the first place is because like I wanted to be healthy and fit. And so I started to really analyze like what is healthy, what is fit. Um, and so for me, like that's feeling good. That's being in a position where your mind is open and you're learning. It's all those blood markers and all that stuff, right? So you're sleeping well, eating healthy, and like you're not about to have a heart attack and all that stuff. But like mainly for me, it's just about like learning and teaching my body to do things in the most efficient way possible, so that I'm always growing rather than just like a spearhead fired in one direction. I'm
Mm.
like this growing, expanding bubble that's like constantly expanding into like a wider berth of knowledge and capacity.
Mm. Mm. So you made it to regionals. Do you mind telling us a little bit about the fuel, the motivation you had back then to make it as far as possible in CrossFit? And what was that journey like? And why did you stop competing?
Yeah, so in 2011, I made it to the regionals for the first time. And it was fun and exciting training for it at the time, right? I was pretty new to CrossFit. I had started in 2009 and had been semi-aware of the sectionals and the process for going to the CrossFit Games in 2010. But even then, I was still pretty much so new that like I only heard people talking about it and didn't really realize what the process was or what the CrossFit Games were. or any of that stuff in detail. But then in 2011 was the first year that they did the CrossFit Games Open, which is an online qualifier. So you could compete at home, film your workouts for review. So when you made it to the games, actually, I don't even think 2011, you maybe didn't even have to film them for review. Maybe you just submitted. So long ago. I definitely filmed my last one. It was the thruster and chest to bar ladder. That one was still on like one of my YouTube channels from back in the day. You can see how skinny I was back then. But it was exciting, right? Because they had these like barbell movements that I had done in college playing baseball. So I was somewhat familiar with some like power cleans and squats, what have you, but not necessarily like to full range of motion or anything like that. So CrossFit kind of putting an emphasis on moving well, full range of motion. 2011, the good movement that CrossFit was a proponent of was not the best movement by anyone's standards who was involved in the specific sports.
Sure.
And not even like to the standards that would probably just be taught in a CrossFit class today. But it was fun and exciting. And then they had the girls, the workouts that were these specific named workouts, so that, you know, you could do the workouts over and over and try to improve at them, then compare them with your buddies and see who had the faster times and what have you. And kind of how I mentioned earlier, some of these workouts were more skill intensive. So being like 160 pounds at the time, my workout partner was probably 230 pounds, and he didn't have the best cardio, but on some of like the short, heavy workouts, you know, he was good at those, and he was willing to like put himself through the ringer to be able to beat me. So as I learned technique, it was really cool to see that I could beat him in these exercises. And I had no idea how I compared to other really fit people, because I was just working out with him and myself. And so when the Open came about and I started putting my scores in and like finding myself like up near the top of the leaderboard for Northern California, is like every feeling imaginable. I was excited, imposter syndrome. I was nervous about like what the workouts would be in the regionals if I qualified. All the feelings. And then like just like the training 2-3 times a day at that point to try to prepare myself.
So what was it like when you actually made it there? How would you summarize that experience?
So fortunately, I've played plenty of sports, and I think that helped me a ton, because at the first workout, we're standing on the starting line, and you know, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with Neil Maddox, Jason Khalipa, and Gabe Subri, people who've just like gone to the CrossFit Games over and over and over again, who I've watched on YouTube, you know, for that year and a half or whatever that I had been doing CrossFit. And rather than being intimidated and kind of getting in the back of the group, I walked right up to the front of the start line and just stood right beside these guys, like, fuck it, I'm going to get my best start position. And I ended up beating Jason Khalipa by 1 second in that workout, which was really cool. It's like the highlight of my CrossFit career. But yeah, it was exciting, and the weekend was tough. Like we had some like epic rain, and like we were competing on like a gravel surface, so we ended up with these like giant divoted holes because of the rain and the gravel with the deadlifts. It was a fun experience. It was really taxing on the body, and yeah, some of the moments I can remember just like as clear as day. Still, for sure.
So looking back, well, I mean, as there are a lot of people who can attribute, I think, quite a bit of their development to CrossFit. I mean, I'm one of them myself, and has led me into like gymnastics, calisthenics, and Olympic weightlifting that I mainly focus on today. And if it wouldn't have been for that, I mean, there's some of that lifting in college, but there's so much. I mean, it's brought so much to the world. Like, what would you attribute, like if you were to give a few shout outs, because I think they deserve it, CrossFit, like what are things you'd like to highlight? And if you're doing CrossFit today, maybe you can give a few pointers, tips of advice, things to keep in mind.
So the most important thing from CrossFit for me, and I think they've always harped on it, is a community. I've made some really great friends that are just people that I can go to for advice, or that can come to me for advice, places to train when I'm out of town, and then just like cool friends to hang out with, right? Like when you go places, you have stuff to do. So the community aspect, I think, is probably the absolute biggest benefit that I've experienced from CrossFit, and then especially owning a CrossFit gym for a period of time. The variety, like we're on this podcast together because of CrossFit.
Right.
The variety of people that I've been able to meet, from various business owners or entrepreneurs, like brilliant software engineers, that I was able to interact with, and like people that maybe I would have seen as better than me, or like celebrity kind of level. Like, why would these people want to talk to me? Understanding just people, right? It was an opportunity to meet so many different people from so many different walks of life, and really just experience that, whatever our backgrounds are, wherever we come from, however far we've achieved up to this point, or however far we're yet to achieve. We're all much more similar than different. And so maybe that's not anything to do with the specific fitness of CrossFit or anything like that, but I think that's what stands out most to me about my memories and positive experiences with CrossFit, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, anytime I travel anywhere, that's my go-to. Is if I'm staying at least a night, or if there's a workout day, then I'm finding the CrossFit gym wherever I'm at. And it pains me whenever there's not one available, or if I'm in the Bay Area and the freaking prices are $250 for a month. And
cheap Bay, man. You know what gym you're going to. All right.
Yeah, I was in Denmark. I've been there several times here over the last over the year, and I think they charged, was it $50 or $60 a month?
All right.
Like, hey, I'm like, how are you able to be so cheap? Like, I think it's one of the bigger CrossFit gyms in Denmark. I think it's called CrossFit Butcher Box. Shout out to you. Cool gym. And they're like, actually, we're one of the most expensive CrossFit gyms here in Denmark. I'm like, what the fuck? How is this possible? So maybe I should, I don't know if it's giving him a tip or not, but it's interesting to see the massive range, the differences that there can be in price. I went to Oslo a few weeks later, and the prices are up there, like probably $150. Sweden is 150, something like that a month.
Okay. Man, so why are we charging so much here? That's gnarly.
Cost of living.
Yeah,
that's for damn sure. Yeah. But I mean, but in that, what I'm saying is the community aspect is just massive. Like, I feel, okay, I come home, like I feel at ease. I feel like I can. It just, machines bother me, to be honest. A lot of machines, I feel like they take up space, and it's like pressing the easy button and people check out. They're not, you leave the awareness at the door and you just go in and do mindless stuff. Yeah. And I think that's a great transition point to going into programming. Programming is something I realized at a very early age, that if I don't follow a program, I get easily hurt because I'm biased for what I like or what I think works, and I don't have a coach's eye for myself. I might have some for someone else, but not myself. And I keep telling people, whoever I come across, if they ever ask me, oh, what do you think I should do? I always tell them, follow a program. Like, don't take exercises here and there. For some people it might work, but my main recommendation is always find someone else's program who's really good at what they do. I mean, that's why I gave it a shot myself, and we teamed up. I mean, you wrote the programming, and that's what we did for a while. Like, what's your opinion on programming overall, and kind of winging it?
Oh man, that's such a big question. Because there's so many like sides of programming, and depending on what you're programming for, the types of sports, there's just like different ways that you can think about it. But some of to just keep things on like the calisthenics and body weights track, some of the most important things I've seen is like that whole muscle confusion idea that gets perpetuated in magazines, and do people read magazines anymore? That gets perpetuated online now, I suppose, would be where that stuff shows up in advertisements, wherever the advertisements may be, is probably like the biggest lie and the biggest false statement that you're going to see in marketing, because if you're constantly changing exercises, you never get good at anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never really done any research on where this like muscle confusion stuff comes from, but I would have to imagine it came from working with like well-trained athletes who had built up years and thousands of reps of skilled movement, and then they were able to, you know, change exercises every week and a half and execute those exercises as well, and make progress. Because if you movements are similar enough, if you have a good base of training, right, you can do like 12 different types of bench press in 12 weeks
Mm-hmm.
and make really good progress. But if you are a beginner who is like the type of person who's going to see those advertisements and like think they need this muscle confusion stuff, you probably can't even do a dumbbell bench press, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like constantly changing this motor pattern so you just never learn is going to just be like the biggest waste of time, in my opinion. So that's like, I guess, like the first thing that I would want to say about programming. Yeah.
What do you think is essential if someone were to be looking for a program? What is essential to look at? What are things that you'd pay attention to?
So if they're looking for like a template, or if they're looking to like work with a coach who's going to program for them.
Let's say both.
Okay. So I think like step one is to just be clear on your goals. And if you're not clear on your goals, then working with a coach who can like talk to you and kind of understand the things that you're interested in and guide you in directions to help you kind of figure out what your goals are would be super important. Because basically, if you're doing programming, as a coach, if you're writing programming, you need to know at the very least is like two things. Is like, where's the athlete at right now, and where do they want to get to in the future, right? And then like bonus information is how much have they been training, how old are they, what is their skill and experience, their flexibility, when do they need to be to this specific point in their training, right? If you have a what, then you need a when also. So then you can kind of place all these elements together, and then as you go through the programming process, you can monitor how fast that they progress through training cycle to training cycle, and then you can legitimately plan in like Olympic style 4-year training cycles to progress these athletes to specific points so that they can be competitive or skilled in whatever it is that they're competing in. And you can do the same thing. You should do the same thing if you just have regular clients. Assume that you're going to have them long term and treat them like they're an actual athlete, right? Take care of them, plan deload cycles, plan transition periods, work around their schedules, so that they can actually make progress without burning out, right? I think the common thing with programming is a need to show the athlete or to show the client really fast progress, because you think that they might quit if they don't see progress right away. So then you like blast out of the gates, and you may get some really good progress early on, but typically that progress is either going to stall or it's going to lead to injuries over the next like 6 to 12 months after that. So I think having a program that has a clear progression, that even as someone who's may not know anything about programming, that you can see whether it's just like the weight goes up every week, or you're doing one more set every week, or you started doing 45-pound dumbbell bench press for 10 reps, and at the end of the cycle you do it for 15 reps. Like stuff as simple as that, right, should be apparent to you even as a beginner. And then deload periods. There should be definitely deload periods in the training. So if you're looking at a training plan and you're not really sure what you're looking at, just look for some form of progression and then deload periods.
And there's one comment I want to make, but I'll hold off on that until I ask you about there's comments you made before about being very specific about your goals. Not just, all right, I want to lift heavier in X, Y, and Z exercises, or I want to get a heavier clean and jerk, I want to get a heavier snatch and so forth, or I want to get a handstand, and I want to get a muscle up, and I want to do pistol squats and all. Let's say so many different goals. I've fallen victim to that several times. I've still have a few exercises that I like to get better at to keep some type of variety. I'm still in that. And I guess that's a personal question I'll ask you too, because I'm currently working on handstands. I'm doing quite a bit of muscle ups just because I wanted to get a strict bar muscle up, working on planche, working on front levers. So those are 4 different exercises to you, and then I do Olympic weightlifting on top of that, because if I don't stimulate my nervous system, I feel like to a degree, I with my lower body as well, and don't get compression on my spine, I get very skinny quickly. My question to you is, you have one exercise, more or less, handstands, like, or one focus area. How are you able to keep a balanced physique? Because as people who have been in the industry for quite some time, there's that general rule of pull double the amount that you push, but there's a whole lot of damn pushing you're doing with handstands. Like, how are you able to keep a balanced physique with so much emphasis on handstands?
I would imagine a large part of it must be genetics, because I don't put any focus on physique type stuff. I just do my training, and all my training, I call it like skill-based training or quality-focused training. It's all about the movement. That's the only focus. Like, I don't care what I look like.
Well, I shouldn't say physique, but I should say muscle balance, like that they're not imbalances.
Oh, I mean, I'm imbalanced. So if I were to like take my shirt off and do a handstand with my back square to the camera, you would see that like one shoulder is higher than the other. I'm slightly shifted off to the side, especially like in my side bending. You would see that there's a lot of twisting one direction, and then the other way there's like also twisting, but twisting in a different way. So like I have tons of imbalances still, and the handstand actually, because it's so symmetrical, right? You're just like legit holding yourself up as square as possible. Training the handstand itself is a really good way to work on imbalances. And typically, like, we're gonna be tight with our hands down this way and not tight with our hands up over our head. So unless you're like a lifetime hand balancer who's never done a pull-up, it's gonna take a long time doing handstands before you do so many handstands that you are imbalanced from not doing enough pulling, if that makes sense.
Okay. Interesting. So you because usually when I feel like, I mean, the classic, if I did, for me, bench pressing was a big thing. If I start doing bench pressing, I tied up like the extended bicep tendon, and it just, everything starts, like the gorilla type of chest like starts happening, and I'm super imbalanced, and I get pain very quickly. You don't experience anything like that?
No, not at all. Yeah, the overhead position is very, very different. And especially for me, because I grew up doing a lot of bench press as well, like you've mentioned. And I'm notoriously just super tight through my chest and my upper back. So all of the handstand work I do and all of like the prep work that I do is just like a really good emphasis on mobility, right? So the more handstands I do, the more flexible I get. And I would imagine, like, with how tight I am, like, it's just going to be like, for the next 10 years, I'm just going to keep gradually getting more mobile in my upper body as I continue to train these handstands. And I think something else that's important to mention with the handstands is that it's a lot more than just holding a handstand, right? Like, just like any training program, if you know that your body has deficiencies, you're going to do extra work to kind of balance and to bring those things to the forefront. So like for me, I know that I have the tight thoracic spine, the tight chest, the tight shoulders. So in my warm up, in my additional mobility training that I do during the day, I'm working on my bridge, I'm working on my thoracic extension, I'm working on opening my chest, I'm working on my external rotators with small dumbbells. And that is part of handstand training. So like, when people think of like handstand training, like, oh, that must get boring doing handstand training all the time. Maybe the specific handstand drills will stay the same, especially for myself. Like some of the very specific intricacies of the drills have changed over the past year and a half. But like for all intents and purposes, I've been doing like the exact same handstand drills for the past like 18 months, like the exact same ones. But flexibility work that I'm doing is changing, like the support work for shoulder health always changes. The additional strength work and conditioning, like working straight arm strength for the planche or front levers, pull-ups, that's always changing with variety. So there happens to be a lot of variety in the training, even though like I do an hour of mobility 5 days a week in the morning, and then my handstand workouts like 3 hours,
A
5 days a
day?
week. So that's like four
Oh,
hours.
you saying 3 hours a day?
Yeah. So that's
Holy shit.
like 4 hours of training that's dedicated to handstands, right? But one of those hours is completely flexibility, and I don't do a single handstand during that time. But I would still consider that like part of my handstand training, because if I wasn't doing handstands and didn't need this mobility for these specific skills, like it's painful. I have to wake up early, right? I wake up at 4 in the morning so I can do my training and then get work done and then go to the gym and have, time to fit it all into my day. Without that overarching desire to be really good at handstands, I don't think that I would really care about the flexibility that much, right? When I did
Mm.
CrossFit and I did Olympic weightlifting, I did enough flexibility to get into an overhead squat, and then I didn't do any more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's for me, it's a really good motivator to pursue these other elements of fitness as they relate to the handstand, that also has more broad reaching effect, right? And kind of the ideas that I've talked about earlier in this podcast about growing in like a circumferential or spherical way, where we're growing out instead of just in one direction, has come from seeing the benefits outside of just the handstands from doing this mobility work, where I don't have the back pain that was so common before, or the knee pain, or any of the little tweaks and stuff are just so much more seldom and so much less severe now, that at this point I probably would do the mobility work, but I definitely never would have gotten into it in the first place
Mm-hmm.
without that initial just like burning desire for the one arm handstand.
Mm. With hmm. What has changed then since you were weightlifting, like back in 2019? Like how has your, and now we're strictly going into your physique, like how has your physique changed since back
My legs are skinnier.
then? Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think gosh, we could just like scroll through my Instagram and look. But I don't really, I don't know. Like I mentioned, like I just like don't care what I look like. And that's easy for me to say because I have pretty good genetics, right? Like my body fat is like a negative percentage probably, no matter how much I try to eat. When I was doing CrossFit, I actually did the GOMAD, which is a gallon of milk a day, where you drink an entire gallon of milk every single day for, as long as you want to. And I think I did it for 3 or 6 months or something like that, and ended up weighing about 190 pounds when I was competing at the
Mm-hmm.
regionals in the 2012 Northern California CrossFit Regional, and still like just as shredded with no extra body fat, just muscles just grew bigger. So like I like to be like realistic and like open about perceptions around training, right? Like I could say like I don't do cardio, all I do is handstands and I'm jacked. Look, you should train this way, you're going to be jacked too. But I think that a large part of it is that I just kind of have the genetics to look this way. So whatever type of training I do, how I look is going to be much more dependent on how much I eat
Mm-hmm.
than the specific type of training.
So would you say like your core, of course your shoulders are probably going to be stronger, and like yeah, the shoulder's an obvious point for handstands, but what let's say get into the core. Like what is your core like right now comparison to before?
My
Your
core
core
is
strength.
strong. My
Yeah.
core is strong, but only in certain movements.
Mm.
So like in a deadlift, I can still pull. Recently, I think I pulled over 400 pounds, which for me is quite good. My best ever is 455. So, pulling over 400 as someone who will touch a barbell once every 3 weeks at the most is quite good. But at the same time, if I were to squat, I don't even think I could squat 300 pounds right now, just because I'm not used to the spinal compression.
Yeah.
Um, and right now, because of the one arm handstand, being able to control the legs and keep everything consistent in your shape is so important that I stopped squatting heavy probably 6 or 7 months ago. So like the type of leg training I'll do now will just be sissy squats, pistol squats,
Hmm.
some deadlifts, some like glute work, just standard glute stuff that you might see on Instagram, doing like leg raises with the band around my knees, or back extensions on the glute ham machine, something like that. Legs are still pretty strong, I think, but
Hmm.
just like the spinal compression in the squat, I would be very hesitant to try to push that.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't want to smash my back without going through like a 4 or 6 week training cycle to kind of get used to the movement again.
So why am I asking all these questions? Because I'm trying to gauge how realistic would it be for me to attempt something. To me, this sounds scary. Like, oh shit, doing one movement only. What will happen to my physique? What will happen to my
For
previous imbalance?
no, no, no.
Well,
I think you would have a very similar experience to me, right? Because you
oh
have
yeah.
the athletic background. Um, I think that you would find that the additional mobility work, and especially loaded mobility work, did provide like a like an extremely potent strengthening effect for your body, and that it was very intense, you would have that like completely fried, like legs are shaking, like you're like dropping cups and breaking them in the kitchen after training,
Hmm.
after completing like the mobility work and the handstand training. So I think you would be surprised at like the potency of it as you got more and more into it, and your workouts became longer and more of like a true full handstand training experience. And then also I think that for a long period of time, before you needed the specificity of one arm handstand type coordination levels, that you would be able to, squat once a week or deadlift or power clean once a week completely fine. Maybe just spend 10 minutes warming up, build to a quick double on a power clean, and then do your handstand workout without interrupting any of the progression that you would see in the first probably year of handstand training.
Hmm. Because we've talked about this before. I see the ultimate warm up to heavier lifting is calisthenics. It's for me, it's been phenomenal because I don't warm up. Calisthenics is my warm up before I
Okay.
Olympic weightlift every single time. Of course, I do a few warm up exercises with just a barbell. That being said, if anyone is listening, for me who has been in the game and been lifting for quite some time, for me this is radical. Like for me this is extremist. Like one fucking exercise, like that's some dedication right there, and that's but it's almost like that's a madman approach. But what was the how did you come to that conclusion? Like that's it. Like I'm not gonna have anything else. Like this is enough. Like this is because you that is whenever we talk, that's a big focus of yours. You can see it in your post as well, is you keep harping on simplifying things. Like what is the one thing like you want to focus on?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, the more things you focus on, the less good you're going to be at any of them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, Lance Armstrong is not winning any like weightlifting competitions,
Right.
and he's not losing sleep about it at night, right? Whatever you think about him as a person, right? Like, his dedication to cycling is clear, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he's the best. So if you want to be very good at something, you have to focus on it, and you can choose how good you want to be at something, right? You're going to have a combination of like the amount of time that you have based upon like your family and work and external factors, and then your genetic potential. But in terms of getting to your genetic potential, whether that be in studying mathematics or becoming a great artist or becoming physically capable, um, you have to spend all your time in that specific endeavor, or you're not going to get to where you can. It's
Mm-hmm.
really that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And, if that's too boring for you, then that's too boring for you. So you choose your own level of involvement. And if you want to be relatively average at 25 different things and you're happy with that, then that's awesome. But if you want to be good at 25 different things and you're losing sleep over it at night and you're hurting yourself to do all these types of training, um, then I would say that you need to kind of take a look at why so many things are so important to you. And maybe if you looked at it close enough, you might realize that some of those goals are more important, and some of that stuff you might be willing to put aside.
Yeah.
And then you would start to really see progress in a way that you hadn't before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the shiny and new, right? Like you see this thing on Instagram, like, hey, I want to do this thing, I want to do this thing, I want to do this thing. And it's like, I mean, you just can't do all those things. I mean, even look at CrossFit. Like CrossFit, the best athletes in the world, right? All they have to do is throw one new movement in the CrossFit Games, and they all fail at it.
Yeah.
They all fail at it. And then Dave Castro gets to laugh and say, you guys should be prepared for anything, right?
Yeah.
And these people, right, like 10 years ago in CrossFit, when I was doing it, it was easy to make fun of CrossFit and say, oh, these are just stupid people doing these dumb things. But the guys now doing CrossFit are as legitimate athletes as any other sport in the Olympics or professional athletes in the world. Um, and when it's that easy to throw a curveball into the system of athletes of that level, um, to me, I mean, that just shows like a very clear example of like there's only so much that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And these athletes are 25 years old, dedicating their lives to this training. Most of them don't have families, don't have kids. Many of them have been able to figure out either moving back in with their parents or getting good sponsors or finding ways that they don't have to even have a job outside of maybe coaching a few classes at a CrossFit gym. And they're still limited on how much that they can train and how much they can work towards. So as just like a regular person who has a full-time job, who has a wife, who has kids, who has a husband, like you got to choose. And if you won't choose, like then all you're going to do is just run into a wall over and over again.
And I think my journey with calisthenics and body movement, gymnastics has been, the more I practice that has probably been the best training style out of any training style, because it transfers into almost every single movement. You won't really get the compound or the Olympic weightlifting type of power or spinal compression we've talked about, but for all other, you can say, movements, it's been so game changing of the body awareness, the strength that I have, the ability to control my body in space is so much better than anything I've ever imagined before. And what I've realized is, and we've talked about this before, what's his name, Matt Frazier is a big he always talks about it, like why don't you guys understand this? Like, to be good at CrossFit, you don't train CrossFit. That's like ludicrous. That's freaking nuts. It's a bit, it's not logical. I mean, why wouldn't you practice something that you want to get better at? But it's the movements. That's what's going to make you really better at it. I've looked at Matt Frazier's programming, and he's saying that it's just the secret sauce and its progression and so forth. It's not a bunch of random workouts, which is usually thrown into a lot of CrossFit programming. But I still think it's too randomized, in my opinion. I'll give an example. As I only train calisthenics, gymnastics, and Olympic weightlifting, I don't do CrossFit. But I thought, okay, I'm in London. I missed open gym. There's a CrossFit class. These people are trying to talk me into it. I'm like, oh, okay. I've told myself I don't do CrossFit. I don't do CrossFit classes. Let me go ahead and try it. It was chest to bar pull-ups. It was wall balls, and it was 400-meter runs. And I can't remember how. I think how certain amount of either get to a X amount of rounds or there's a time cap of 25 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'll be all right at it. End up fucking smoking everyone. I'm like, how the hell did this happen? And excuse me. And what I realized is exactly what we're speaking to. It's I've gotten better at CrossFit by not doing CrossFit, but specifically only focusing on skills. Yeah. And that's the whole, I mean, that's what Matt Frazier preaches too. If you only focus on the skill, you keep a certain, I mean, of course, if you go into competition, you start working on the engine, but then that's, I mean, you can be a freaking killer doing that. And the revelation that I had with that too, like you say, you don't train cardio. If you have a base, if you've been an athlete earlier, like the cardio is probably the easiest thing to build up. Like that's not hard, but it's the hardest thing to really build up, and that will give you the most bang for your buck if you want to evolve. I would say as a with your mind, with your body, like who you are as a individual, even spiritually. I would say calisthenics, that's up there. And while you're right now, you're proposing to me to elevate my game to just, all right, stop messing around with all these different exercises. Just go to one, that's a challenge for me. And with that, that's a lot of additional comments to my question. That is, calisthenics is cool, right? So if you look at anyone who's doing it, let's say on Instagram, let's say any person that does all these variety of movements, like I want to do it all. I can imagine all these other people like the human flag. Everyone wants to do a human flag. Everyone wants to, I don't know, do the planche. I don't know, maybe not so many, maybe front lever and all that stuff. But there's a wide variety, but it takes such a long time to getting good at this stuff. Like, what do you recommend to these people who want to get into calisthenics? Like, where do you even start off?
Well, gosh, there's so many things that you talked about there. So like the idea of training one thing is it sounds like one thing, but it's not one thing, right? Like, because like I keep mentioning, like the mobility is like separate training from it, even though it's like directly related to benefiting it. So the training has a significant amount of variety. And when you're getting into calisthenics, it's going to be a long journey. So like if you're looking to work towards a planche, like you likely have a 3 to 5 year journey ahead of you, right? Like you might find some YouTube videos where someone got it in a year, but you don't necessarily know how much that person weighs, how old that person is, if they maybe did progressive gymnastics until they were like 9 years old and then moved and had to stop for some reason, and now they're like 14 years old and decided to pick it up again, right? And they have this incredible training background that they just didn't mention in their little YouTube highlight reel. So in terms of like looking at progress and what to expect, I think the important thing for people getting into any type of training is to just respect the movement and focus on the quality and try to learn how to do every exercise you're doing as well as possible. And if you do those exercises as well as possible, you're going to get the benefits of the progression, right? Because the progressions for exercises, right? People have come up with all of these different progressions, whether it's running intervals or whether it's like band assisted exercises for planche and pull-ups. They've come up with them and used them, and they've become popular because they work. Right? But if you're doing, say, you want to get your first strict pull-up and you have a giant band on the pull-up bar and you're just bouncing up and down, you're not going to grow any stronger, right? But if you do like a nice clean strict pull-up, control the negative, and have the band truly assist you rather than do the pull-up for you, you're going to get stronger. So like my advice would just be to try to learn how to do the exercise, whether that's asking a coach, whether that's finding the exercise and then Googling it and learning what different people have to say about it, or seeing different variations of it and kind of understanding the leverage that's produced, because so much of gymnastics and calisthenics is just simple leverage, right? You just have to be strong enough to support in these positions, and then you'll either balance, you'll tip, you'll press to handstand once you hit these different loading scenarios in the proper positions. And kind of to address the idea about focusing on one thing. Like, if you were to do my handstand workouts right now for 3 hours, the only thing that would happen is you would get hurt. So as a beginner, you're going to be able to handle more variety. So maybe as a beginner, if you wanted to train 6 days a week, maybe you would have an hour-long handstand workout one day. The next day, you might do an hour and 20 minutes of some strength related stuff. Maybe half of that hour and 20 minutes, you start off with straight arm strength where you're working on your planche leans, some arch hangs for your scaps. And then you finish it off with some bent arm stuff, whether it's ring dips, handstand push-up variations, and some pull-ups. And then the third day you might do a leg session and then finish that leg session rather than doing traditional accessory work like lunges and stiff leg deadlifts. You might finish it off with hip mobility, hamstring mobility, stretching, right? And then you could repeat those workouts again for the fourth, fifth, sixth day of the week, and then just kind of rinse, wash, repeat that, progressing time on your holds or reps or number of sets to increase your training volume to build up a training response and grow stronger over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then after 6 weeks, you can make a slight change to the program to either change the exercises, reduce the assistance, add weight to exercises that are appropriate to do so, what have you.
I think I'll give some shout outs here. What I would say is probably fine if you're completely new. I think CrossFit has a good approach to it. To have variety, because I think that's one of the main things is kind of trying out to see what you like, because some of these movements you probably like more than others, and if you're going to stick with it, it's important that you like it. There is one, what's his name, Dusty, remind me of his name.
Highland.
Yeah, he has a cool program on Train Aerobic that you can check out. That's a good intro if you haven't dabbled with gymnastics or calisthenics before. Are there any other people that you think that they're interesting?
I mean, obviously you should check out my stuff. And if you want coaching, I do one-to-one coaching, and that's going to be, whether you choose me or someone else, one-to-one coaching is going to be the best opportunity, because they're going to be able to assess you and identify what you actually need. And by understanding what you need and explaining it to you, why they program the way they do, whether they program a lot of variety or they program a lot of consistent training, whatever they think is appropriate for you, you're going to have an explanation to why that is. And understanding why something is happening, in my experience for myself and for the clients that I work with, gives a lot of buy-in. It makes you much less worried about whether something is boring or exciting, because you're much more focused on like the process and how it's going to work.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that point.
Yeah, but like in terms of like, so I can say like people that I follow online that I just like, I just really like how they explain stuff, or their personalities. So like one person who I've never worked with, but I would love to work with one day to have her coach me. Acro Megan is her handle on Instagram, and she comes up with just like really cool drills. Like she'll just make up a drill, like have a client who's trying to learn something, and she'll just legit like make up a drill, and she's like, hey, here's this drill that I made up to help my client. And like to me that just shows that she's not, I don't know this person at all. I'm not, anything like that. But just from being an outside observer, that shows me that she has an understanding of training in a way that she can truly adapt the skills that she's trying to teach to the client in question, rather than just saying like, all right, I have these 6 exercises. You're going to get 5 reps of this one. You're going to get 10 reps of this one. You're going to get 12 reps of this one. And that's going to make you ready for the 4th progression in this series. That's a template, right? That might work for some people. It's probably not going to work for most people. So coaches that can like legitimately tailor their programming and their skills and their progressions in a way that meets the athlete's needs, that's much more something I'm interested in.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, over our conversations, we know you're all about the customized approach, and I love that too. I'm saying there are quite a few people who are not ready sometimes to dive head first,
Yeah.
and they just want to dip their toes. And that's what I was saying, like the Dusty Highland program on Train Heroic. I think
Yeah.
can
I
be a
haven't
good
really
intro, but
followed any of those programs.
yeah, but what I'm saying is, because this would I was going to make a transition into, this is what we talked about, and that I've been trying to encourage you put out there. Maybe it's in the works, an ongoing, continuous calisthenics program where maybe there's intro workouts on Train Heroic. Still waiting for that to come out, and maybe there's going to be one maybe there's going to be one handstand specific one that you're going to be releasing, because you have at least one customer here that you're speaking to right now. But then
So,
that is a good, like, hands off approach if you don't want the one-on-one coaching. But if you really want to, like, if you want like really get results and really, right, you know what you want. I mean, Zack is phenomenal, and we've done that work together, and I'll put a I'll put a good word in for your programming here, because this is what we collaborated, is the amount of nuances you put into the programming is very subtle, but it shifts and it makes for great progress. Like, it doesn't have to be a massive amount of variety, like we spoke to, tying it back into earlier in our conversation. It doesn't have to be all these different exercises, but it can be nuances of that exercise, and that keeps you still fresh, engaged, not bored sometimes, which I feel like I get because I do the same exercises all the time. But there these slight nuances, and sometimes the wave effect that you've had for the programming of sometimes, like, you start with 2 sets one week and then there's 3 sets the next week, or like, I think, what was it, 3 sets, then 4 sets, and then back to 3 sets. Like, there's the wave type of programming.
Yeah, depending on the exercises, you might go 6, 8, 10, or 8, 10, 12, and then deload. Or if you're doing like a 6-week cycle rather than a 4-week cycle, you may do like 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 2.
And I think that's fascinating. It's a fascinating approach that I haven't seen any other program or coach take. But back to the question of, will we be seeing some more? We've seen the mobility program that you released. Will there be any body weight calisthenics programs, gymnastic programs?
Yeah, so like a lot of that stuff that you talked about, I have a ton of ideas around. I would love to create a progressive program that people can kind of get on board with and follow gradually, and get feedback in the process. So I'm kind of weighing in my head, how exactly do I create this program, do some marketing around it so that there's a good base of people who start when it starts, right? Because if you come on into the middle of like a year-long program, you come in week or month 5, your experience is going to be a lot different than the person who started in the beginning of it. So there's a lot of logistical hurdles from that respect. And then just based upon my personality, I'm going to want to be able to give feedback, whether it's creating a forum, like a Facebook group or something within Train Heroic specifically, where I can communicate with the people and find out what they're struggling with, and then make some type of content to like supply the needs of those clients, whether that means adjusting programming for the future as we progress, right? If people are progressing really quickly, right, maybe providing more options for faster progression. If people are struggling with stuff, maybe providing more options for different like lateral progressions, right, where we're coming at the same skills from a different angle, but not necessarily like a harder, more intense angle. So there's a lot of stuff like that, and that stuff's pretty easy to manage as you go through, because you're just like, oh, they're not getting this skill, let's try it a different way. That's pretty simple. But just putting it all together, that's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I do have some templates now, which I was pretty resistant towards, just because I feel like templates can't possibly supply the needs of everyone. But like you mentioned, a lot of people aren't ready to make that commitment to one-to-one coaching, whether it's the just accountability of it purely, or like the financial cost is quite a bit higher than any templates you're going to have to deal with when you're working one-to-one with somebody. So trying to kind of like create those templates to give people opportunities to train with good programming that's functional, even if it's not quite as good as if someone was one-to-one watching your videos and giving you direct feedback, is something that I'm starting to embrace. And I've gotten some pretty good feedback from a lot of people who've bought the programs and experienced some good progressions with their mobility and handstands and what have you. In terms of a calisthenics program, um, yeah, I think honestly, like, I got that like imposter syndrome. So I see so many people out there who are much more advanced than me with their programs. I'm like, why would people want to buy mine? Why wouldn't they just go buy like Cy Monster Strength's program? That dude's a beast, right? Like, why would they come to me? And so like, some point I'll get around to it, and I'll probably start with just like some like introductory skills, like people who want to get their first push up, people who want to get their first pull up, and try to really embrace that audience, because I think that training is very simple and probably doesn't need one-to-one coaching, but it does need solid progression. So if you just every now and then try to do some pull-ups and 3 weeks go by, then you try again and you're not consistent with it, you're going to have a really hard time building that strength. But like, if you just do some like pull-up and push-up variations 3 times a week for 6 months, like you're going to be way stronger. So in terms of calisthenics, like you might be on the lookout if you're interested in really just getting started with it for some stuff like that. And depending on how people react to it, maybe down the road, we'll get some more progressions towards some more serious movements, some more challenging stuff. But definitely, I got some good handstand stuff on there. I just released a program for press to handstand for flexible people.
Nice.
So like anybody who's got a background in like yoga, or who, just generally isn't very strong, but you could just fold in half and like put your palms flat on the ground with no trouble at all. If you're interested in press to handstand, like definitely check that out.
How would you describe that experience? What's the user experience like if you do
For Train Heroic?
Yeah, exactly.
I've never used it as an athlete, but I don't get any complaints, which is interesting from the people who use a program, who give me feedback. I haven't had anybody complain about the interface or anything like that.
I'll guess I'll give my perspective as I've used it quite extensively. So the beauty of it, instead of having Excel sheets or printing out paperwork and so forth.
Oh, you mean as a coach?
Well, no, I'm actually as an athlete,
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so you open up the app, you see the entire, well, you click into the day that you're going to do, and you get all the exercises, you get the sets, you get the reps, but you can also type in your score. And then it'll also track it, so you don't have to keep track of what's your personal record or so forth. It'll always have that, and it will show you that. And based off of, let's say if you have percentages or so forth, it'll always calculate that. You'll do your own calculate, or it'll calculate for you, so you don't have to use your calculator. It'll always have a video, so because that is one of the pains that I always had. Let's check out YouTube, whatever, to find the right exercise, and then I have to scroll through whatever 2-minute long video. I only want to look at 10 seconds, but I have to find that 10 seconds in a 2-minute video. Instead, you just have that right in that app, in that exercise. You click on it, makes it very smooth, saves you time, and I'm all about saving time and not having to click around. This is also something that Zack has access to, so he could probably give comments if depending on his workflow and the relationship and the type of
with the template, you can definitely like go in and ask questions, and it goes to like this group place. So like all the people's questions are there. So if you were to like scroll back through the questions, you can see the questions that people have asked throughout the training cycles, which is really nice. All the demo videos I use are my demos. So like whatever I'm programming, the demo shows exactly how I expect it to be done. It's not just some like random templated video that I just like yanked off YouTube. Because like everything I program, like there's a very specific reason why I programmed it. I want you to do it exactly this way. Mm-hmm. And that's how you're going to get the progression for it. And so I accompany the videos with little written explanations with the most common cues, sometimes highlighting the common mistakes. And then even within the workout, if there's extra common mistakes that people make, I'll add it even within the workout, just in the event that the people don't click the button to read the extra written description along with the demo. Yeah.
So anyone listening, I'll tell you a reason why you should check this out. I've seen, I've been in the game for quite some time, done I don't know how many different programs, and when I saw, and of course I've been trained by Zack too, but when I saw what he did, this is unbiased because I'm not affiliated, I'm not getting paid by Zack or anyone in his circle. When I saw what he was doing, and I saw the quality of content that he was putting out there on Instagram, I think when we met, or reconnected. You had maybe you were happy that you broke like 1,000 followers. I think it was something like that back a year and a
Yeah,
half
yeah,
or
I was
something like
pumped.
ago. This is a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
The dude has 102,000 followers today. This is, and this is what I told him. Hey, you're a fucking master trainer. It's just it hasn't gone viral yet. So the guy knows his stuff. Like he has a very unique and, as you might be able to tell, opinionated approach to how you train. He's very specific and detail oriented, but that also means freaking results. Like if you're serious about what you do and you want to get results and you want to have a dedicated path, not just like something that's thrown together that it looks decent enough. No, like this is the good stuff right here. And if you look and if you want to keep tuned in, like check Zack out on especially on Instagram, but maybe you can give a shout out to where can people find you?
Instagram is for sure the best place. Yeah. At Zackheight, ZACKHEIGHT on Instagram is for sure the best place. It's where I post stories every single day almost. And pretty regularly, once or twice a week, I'll get a post up highlighting some of the exercises that I'm either using with my clients or stuff that's in my program. Or sometimes I just share the demo videos that I make. A lot of my posts that have actually gotten me more followers happen to just be like, I'm just filming demo videos that day. I'm like, I'll just put some of these up and then say something about my approach to training and the combination of those exercises. And then I think my philosophical perspective with training really resonates with people.
And this is a major differentiator in a world of hype, in a world of chasing the next shiny thing. Is something that makes, in my opinion, Zack stand out. Like he, as you heard early on in the conversation, he takes 5, 10, 15 like year approach to his training. It's not about, okay, what is the coolest thing that just popped up in my feed in Instagram? Well, let me try to recreate that and get as many likes as possible. No, Zack, like he knows where he's at. He knows what he's doing. He's dedicated to his path, and he's consistent. Like he has, and a big part that you don't see too much of, he has integrity. Has integrity when it comes to his method, and his approach to it. And maybe he has not expressed too much of this, but he is hardcore when it comes to how to do certain things. Like there's not, like he's a cool guy, he's an approachable guy, but it's not one of those like, oh coach, I'm not feeling this and that today. No, okay, well let's talk through it and why, and let's find a way for you to get it done and still hold you accountable. Like I think those makes for, in my opinion, master coaches. Like the people that hold you accountable, they see through the excuses. They won't be an asshole about it, but it'll still keep you on track and make sure that the work is done. And as I too, I get part of that shiny syndrome, object syndrome, is like get distracted by all these shiny things that I want to pursue. Like Zack knows where he stands, and he knows why he does what he does, and he won't sway. And I think that's such a key for life, that you have at least one person in your life like that will freaking be a pillar, that will be stability. Like no matter what, and especially with fitness, if you have that guy in your corner, like you're freaking set. Like you're solid. Like now you just, what you do, you'll responsibly get your ass in the training space we're at, get the work done. There's no excuses of, oh, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, I'm not feeling it. No, Zack is the guy that you can just flip up the Instagram. All right, he's fucking getting it done. If he's able to do 3 hours of freaking handstand work, is he able to do 1 hour of mobility and wake up that early? It's easy to just flip up train heroic and do whatever it is that you're programmed to do. And this is the beauty of it. Like take away the painful stuff that makes you not want to train, and train like a pro.
Yeah, I think that kind of highlights some points and like the benefit of like trimming down what you're focused on, right? Because when you have so many things that you're focused on, I think it's super important as a coach to like understand what you're doing and believe in it enough where you're really going to push your clients to that direction. But then at the same time, like you said, people are going to have different things come up in their life. People are going to have schedules. They're going to get sick. They're going to have car accidents. They're going to have family members get sick, whatever, just different stuff is going to happen. And so sometimes you're going to miss training, and that's not the end of the world. But if you're skipping training because you're working on something else, like I don't really have any tolerance for that. And I don't do any contracts with people. I've never fired a client. I've never fired an online client, but if your perspective is such that like you think the training is boring or something like that, then like you're not on contract, right? We finished the month out, and best of luck in your journey the way you want to do it. Because I do real training and I teach real training. And if you want to actually do real training and make progress, like that's who I want to work with. And so people who want to work that way, when they have things come up that are personal experiences, 100% of support, right? Change their program, give them a week of deload, whatever they need to kind of work through that. But for people who just want to be ADD and do their own thing, like, yeah, I don't have any patience at all for that type of stuff.
Amazing. Well, Zach, this has been a golden nugget.
Good positive note to end the podcast.
Oh yeah, that's that's the way to go. Well, you can see the nuances of Zach. I think you've heard it in the podcast. You can check him out more on Instagram. It's a cool YouTube channel as well. He did some cool stuff with Marcus Philly recently, so you can check that out as well. But yeah, Zach, freaking awesome having you on finally.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to do it. Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for finally getting me on here.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, I appreciate Zach. He challenges me. He's one of these people that he elevates me. I feel like there's certain areas of my life where I can help him. He is a true ally. I'm glad I got to share this relationship, this conversation that we got to have, how he challenged me. Now it's on top of my mind to think about, okay, how can I go down to even fewer exercises in my training, and how can I humble myself further, be more specific about how I do things. It's a great teacher for sure. And if you want to understand and learn more about Zack and what he's up to on a day-to-day basis, check out his Instagram. Zack Height is his handle. You can find all this in the show notes, his website, his YouTube channel. If you want to be coached by him, I mean, I've been coached by him, the best coaching that I've ever gotten, and that's unbiased. It's hands down the best coaching I've ever gotten. He knows his shit. You can also check out his programs. There's a stretching program that I'm just about to start. I've done some pretty advanced stretching with gymnastics bodies. You can also check that out if you want. But this is a new level that I want to try with Zack. He also has a few other programs, I believe, on Train Heroic. You can find that on his Instagram as well. And keep a lookout for more programs. I'll be keeping a lookout myself. So thank you for tuning in. This was a very interesting podcast for me. Hope you enjoyed it as well. And I wish you a blessed day. Much love.